Warning, today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Then Is Now podcast. I am your host, Rigor. In this series of special Then Is Now episodes, 13 Days of Hallowtober, we are exploring what are widely regarded as the scariest movies of all time. Joining me today is filmmaker Chris Esper, who is based out of Attleboro, Massachusetts. He's made several short films, including Imposter, Yesteryear, Bent, The Deja Viewers, and Undatement Center. And currently he owns and operates a production company called Stories in Motion, where he continues to create a variety of projects. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Excellent, excellent. So today we're going to discuss Night of the Living Dead from 1968.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh, the dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the living dead. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night. Of the living dead.
Siblings Barbara and Johnny drive to a cemetery in rural Pennsylvania to visit their father's grave. As they're leaving, a strange man kills Johnny and viciously attacks Barbara. She flees and attempts to take shelter in a farmhouse, but finds the woman who lived there dead and half-eaten. She sees a multiplying number of strange ghouls led by the man from the cemetery approaching the house. A man named Ben arrives, secures the farmhouse by boarding up the windows and doors, and drives away the ghouls with a lever-action rifle that he finds in the closet and with fire, which he previously discovered that the ghouls fear. Barbara, in a somewhat catatonic state from shock, is surprised when a couple, Harry and Helen Cooper, emerge from the cellar. They'd been taking shelter there with their young daughter Karen after a group of the same monsters overturned their car and bit Karen, leaving her seriously ill. Also sheltering there are Tom and Judy, a teenage couple who came to the house after hearing an emergency broadcast about a series of brutal killings. Tom aids Ben in securing the farmhouse, while Harry angrily protests that it's unsafe before returning to the cellar, which he believes is much safer. Ghouls continue to besiege the farmhouse in ever-increasing numbers. The group must spend the night fighting against the horde of zombies outside in order to survive. So, Chris, tell me about your initial impression of this film and when you first saw it.
I think I first saw it, I want to say I first saw it in my late teens, early 20s. I can't remember how I saw it. I want to say I may have rented a copy somewhere, but I think the first time I saw it, I was left in a bit of shock, particularly by the ending. I think it was like one of the first zombie films I've seen, so I knew going in that this sort of set the standard for that kind of thing, and I remember being very impressed by it. That it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I think when I first heard about it, I was expecting some kind of like B picture, which I mean, in a lot of ways it was, but it didn't like go into the tropes or it didn't have any of that sort of campiness. It actually had substance to it, which I remember being kind of I was very impressed by that.
Nice. Yeah, I think as a kid I'd heard of it. More so I'd heard about how shocking Dawn of the Dead was because I had friends whose older siblings had seen the film.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a kid I was always reading monster magazines and that sort of thing and, catching the late night horror movies and stuff. So I knew something about it and I knew there was a connection to Dawn of the Dead. But I think for me, I had rented it at the advent of VHS tapes when they first had stores where you could rent videotapes. That was probably my first experience seeing the film because, like I said, I had been exploring films that I had heard or read about, but I hadn't seen. So that I remember that really scared me when I was younger. I probably saw it like at age 10 or 12 or something, and I think to this day, even watching it recently, I find it terrifying.
Oh no, it is. I haven't rewatched it recently myself. I was actually amazed at how terrifying it was because last time I saw it, I don't remember feeling that sort of dread and terror, but seeing it again certainly came through. And especially when you study it more from a filmmaker's perspective, yeah, it is pretty terrifying.
Yes, and that bleak ending is really, I think that sort of sets off, because this was 1968, and I think this sets off a sort of a trend in movies in the 70s that have bleak endings.
Oh, yeah.
Like Race with the Devil and several others. Now, this film's directed by George Romero, who is considered the father of the modern zombie film. There had been zombie films in the past, like I Walked with a Zombie and White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. But those were different. Those were Haitian zombies that were they weren't undead. They were just, in a strange mental state because of chemicals they were given.
Right.
But Romero kind of took that concept and made it his own. And some of his films include Dawn of the Dead, which is the sequel to Night, Day of the Dead, which is the third in the trilogy, as well as a bunch of others that are pretty popular among horror fans, such as The Crazies, Martin, Creepshow, Stephen King's Monkey Shines, as well as The Dark Half, Bruiser, and then he did a follow-up zombie trilogy with Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead.
Yes.
And I have to say, I like all of his Dead movies. I think perhaps Day of the Dead, to me, is the weakest of the six. But maybe that and Survival of the Dead are probably, neck and neck. But I loved about... Well, first of all, I loved Land of the Dead because that was just well done. Diary of the Dead, to me, what it did for me was I hate found footage films.
Yes.
Because I get nauseous in them. I get car sick.
Yes.
And in that movie, Romero knew when to put the camera down, when to use a security camera. It wasn't all shaky cam from beginning to end, and that made me really enjoy the film.
Right. Yeah, I know. I definitely saw Day of the Dead. I definitely saw Dawn of the Dead. I can't recall if I've seen his other trilogy. I may have seen Land, but yeah, those later three, I don't recall as well as I do the first three. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, Land has the guy from The Mentalist, the guy that played The Mentalist, and it's got Dennis Hopper and John Leguizamo in it.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, I gotta check that out. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah. I do have to check. I mean, I actually saw Monkey Shines last year. I was in, this is very strange. I was in New Orleans doing a show, filming a show, and it was one evening. I was so tired. I had nothing to watch, nothing to do really. And then I'm in my Airbnb. I'm just scrolling through the on-demand thing. There's a bunch of free movies, and I'm like, I see Monkey Shines, and I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't seen this. It's one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. Strange. Just beyond belief strange.
Definitely. I think I saw that in the theater with my mother. It was just like, because we had to go see it. It was Stephen King and George Romero.
Yeah.
You just can't,
Yeah.
So getting back to Night of the Living Dead, the film had something like $114,000 budget. It was shot outside Pittsburgh, where it premiered on October 1st in '68, and it grossed $12 million domestically and $18 million internationally, which is about 250 times its budget. So it's not only was a hit in and of its own right, it became, a cult classic.
Sure.
And let's see, it was I believe Romero and his buddies. So this was sort of they were already a group to begin with that made this film. It wasn't like he just pulled together a team, because they made commercials.
Yes.
In Pittsburgh.
Well, yeah, that's one of the interesting pieces of trivia with this movie. He and his team have been doing commercials and other industrial films and projects, and one of the things that that George Romero was doing at the time was he was making films for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And,
oh, that's right.
Yes, and a lot of the money that he made from that went into making this movie, and I think Fred Rogers actually saw it. He had quite the reaction to it, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yes.
It's funny because he did a whole an episode about they went to the set of The Incredible Hulk.
Yes.
Showed you how the makeup was
That's
done
right.
so kids wouldn't be scared. He should have done that with Dawn of the Dead.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yep. but yeah. So he was like kind of doing that sort of thing before moving on to making this movie. And it's funny when you think about independent filmmaking and you watch this movie, it's kind of nice to see some of those, not mistakes, but like little like low budget things that you recognize, and it kind of resonates with you as a independent filmmaker, because you're like, yeah, no, it there's that sort of independent feel to it that I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so well shot and well composed.
Yes.
All the scenes are visually well composed. You know, it doesn't from its time, it doesn't have that typical low budget schlocky film kind of feel to it.
Right.
It looks like everything was done on purpose.
Yes, yeah.
Everything you see on camera.
Yes. In particular, the opening scene at the cemetery, having rewatched it recently, I was actually impressed with how well it was shot. Particularly, the shots of the car coming down the road, those beautiful wide shots that he had composed, and then of course, the lighting in the cemetery and that sort of thing. All that just comes together really well, and of course the suspense that builds up when we get our first kill in the movie, and it's shocking.
Right, it is shocking, and he does a good job of, he gets right into the action.
Yes.
Within the first 10 minutes is when the zombie starts to attack Barbara and Johnny, and it just keeps going from there, and it doesn't let go of you. The film itself doesn't necessarily need to waste time giving us backstory on the characters.
Yeah.
We kind of get their personalities almost immediately, and then it's a question of can they work together or not to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where he didn't need to do any kind of exposition or any kind of expository dialogue. You just it didn't matter where these characters came from. You just you got glimpses, and then the movie just runs with it, and then you end up rooting for these people because of that.
And that's what's good about this film too, is because of the fact that there are so many characters trapped in this one place. At least any audience member can identify with at least one of these characters in the movie. Mm-hmm. And it's not like a group of teenagers and that you can't stand any of them.
Yes.
And so who cares if they all get killed off?
Mm-hmm.
In this, you kind of want them all to survive, maybe except for, what's his name? Harry.
Yes.
But now, this movie was co-written by John Russo, who co-wrote it with George Romero. He's an internationally known author. In fact, I have one of his books on how to make a low-budget film. It's
no
pretty
kidding.
good.
I haven't read that.
Yeah.
That's great.
I've had that on my shelf. I don't have the title handy, but yeah, it's a really good book, as well as like I said, he co-wrote this film, and he's got quite a few screen credits. He's an internationally known author, but he's got a few screen credits, and the one that really stands out to me is that he wrote Return of the Living Dead, which actually references this movie in that film too, which I thought was really cool.
Right.
We'll return to 13 Days of Hallowtober after these messages.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't? Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Hey folks, I just wanted to take a minute here to tell you about the hosting service that we use at Haven Podcasts. Podserve.fm. Podcast hosting has never been easier. They do all the work to get your podcast on Apple Podcasts and other major podcast networks. They help you navigate the podcasting world, whether you're brand new or have years of experience. Folks, I can't tell you how happy I am with their service. When I first started this podcast, I searched around intensely for the right hosting platform. I found Podserve and used their simple 4-step process, and in a short amount of time, my podcasts were on the internet and available through all the major podcast networks. And their customer support is unreal. Every time I goof things up and make a mistake, like posting the wrong show to the wrong feed, I email them, and I kid you not, within minutes I get a response and the problem is resolved. And they're the only podcasting host that actually helps you get listeners. Other podcast hosts stop at podcast upload and don't help promote your podcast. Well, Podserve makes sure your podcast is seen by thousands of people. The promotion is free, and they put you on podparadise.com, which has over 5,000 visits a day from avid podcast listeners and is growing every day. Each day, Pod Paradise selects 5 podcasts to spotlight on their front page. Maybe yours could be there soon. Podserve's pricing is simple. Only $19 a month. That's it. No tiered pricing platform, just one low fee. For $19 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited podcasts, free podcast promotion, your podcast on all platforms, detailed download analytics, one-on-one customer support. You pay month to month, and you can cancel at any time. And when you sign up, you get 14 days free. You don't even have to give them your credit card. I love their service so much I put a reminder in my phone to add my credit card when the 14 days was almost up. I couldn't give them my $19 fast enough. I'm telling you, I really didn't believe it until I actually signed up and saw my podcasts on everything from iTunes to Stitcher and Spotify and more in a ridiculously short amount of time. So if you've got a podcast and you don't have a hosting platform, I highly recommend podserve.fm. Check them out.
Spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Here are your hosts, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit MonsterKidRadio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Bryce, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic monsters, modern talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kid Radio.
All right, now our cast, I'm going to say that most of the cast don't have a whole bunch of credits. Dwayne Jones plays Ben.
Yep.
And while he didn't do too many films, the one that I think he's most remembered for, besides this film, would be Ganja and Hess, which is a weird vampire-ish kind of tale.
I don't think I saw that.
It's definitely offbeat. It's not. It doesn't hold up like. Well, it holds up as a film, but it's way more trippy and bizarre. Like Night of the Living Dead is a little more straightforward.
Right. Yeah.
And Ganja and Hess is a little bit more trippy. So if you have to be able to accept that fact when you're watching the film.
Yeah.
But he's very good in it as well. It's too bad he didn't go on to do more films. Then we've got Judith O'Dea as Barbara, Carl Hardman as Harry Cooper, Marilyn Eastman as Helen Cooper, Keith Wayne as Tom, and Judith Riley as Judy. Now, personally, I think they all did a great job, although I think Judy wasn't that great of an actress.
Yeah,
Judith Riley. And even when Barbara, I've heard arguments that she's terrible in it too, but I think she plays it well. She basically loses her mind, or she at least goes temporarily insane, and I think she plays that very well.
I thought so too. I mean, I get that argument as well. I mean, I think the best actor in the movie is the actor that plays Ben. I thought he was...
Yeah, Dwayne Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really good. But you know what? It doesn't take away from the film.
No.
It actually, sometimes, when I've watched this movie so many times, but sometimes on certain viewings, they just feel like real people to me, rather than actors playing characters.
Yeah, no, and that's sort of what works about it. Even some of the shooting, some of the shooting of it comes off as more, I don't want to say documentary-esque, but there's it has more of a reality to it than it does a cinematic look. And I think the actors being real people, or that sort of adds to that reality that you're in on it with them because of that reality base that it has.
Right, and it's funny, it didn't occur to me till you just said that, the way it seems realistic. What really, my favorite parts of the movie, and what works for me, and I just realized, based on what you said, that's probably because it was realistic, are the newscasts. And the news people talking about what's going on. It's very believable. They do those so well.
Oh yeah, no, they do, and and also too, like the way some of the scenes in the house are shot. It just again, there's just a certain reality to it, and also the fact that the movie primarily takes place in that home is another way to feel that entrapment that the characters are feeling. So no, I think all that just gives it a fresh feel to it that we really didn't quite see in movies that were made before this one.
Right, exactly. Again, a movie that sort of pushes the bar and inspires people. Now, like you had said when we talked about Psycho, that Hitchcock inspired John Carpenter, I think this film inspired Sam Raimi.
Without a doubt, absolutely. And again, we wouldn't have Sam Raimi if we didn't have George Romero. So, it's very cyclical, the way these things happen.
Right. And it's interesting, too, because sometimes he manages to make... George Romero manages to make the whole situation work, even though it's, bleak. And these people are trapped in this house. And it's funny because it's the kind of movie that when you watch it, you think about, what would you do in this situation? And for me personally, I would take all the supplies and everything, go to the second floor, and then rip the stairs out.
Oh, yeah.
Then they couldn't get to you. And if you had to get out, you could jump out the window.
Right, yes. And, and of course, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, the whole zombie movie cliche that sort of got started with this. The concept of one of the characters having to shoot or kill another character because they've been infected by this. I mean, now it's such a trope these days.
Right.
It's such a trope.
Yeah.
But even though going into this movie, you're aware of that trope, particularly people who haven't seen the movie before, but they know about other zombie movies, it somehow still works because it's done in a way that is, because it was fresh for the time, it has a lot more emotional weight to it than what we see now when movies that attempt to do that whole thing.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of these films, there's been a lot of people have over the years have read into it a lot of social things.
Yeah.
About it, like for example, having Dwayne Jones be the first black actor to play a main character, which I think, according to Romero, he was just the best actor for the part.
Yes, yeah.
They weren't specificely looking for that, you know.
Yep, exactly. Yep, Romero's gone on record to say that. Yeah, no, it had nothing to do with him being of a different race. He just happened to be the best actor for the movie, but because of that sort of accidental casting, if you will, and the time in which this movie came out, it was a movie. It was a movie that was in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely, and it's a good tale of humanity too. It
is.
When faced with a horrible situation, you either rise above it or you come unglued. And some of the characters in the movie did both. Some characters rose above it, and some characters came unglued.
Right, and it's interesting. When I watched this movie. I haven't watched this movie recently to talk to you about this. This movie feels right now, with everything going on in the world right now, more timely than ever before, ever.
Right. So I just want to finish off the cast list here. We've got one more person that needs mention. Was a sort of a cameo,
right,
by Pittsburgh horror TV host Bill Cardilli, who was also known as Chilly Billy, the horror TV host,
yep.
And he plays the field reporter. And he plays himself basically in it.
Yeah.
Which I think first of all, I never really actually got to see any Chilly Billy's shows, obviously because I didn't live in Pittsburgh. But
yeah,
it must have been so cool for Romero, who probably did watch the show when he was younger and must have been so excited to get Chilly Billy in the movie, even for a cameo.
I'm sure, yeah, and I'm sure for those that were in that area. And watch the show. I'm sure that was like one of those inspired casting choices where that was like sort of not the star that was going to sell it, but I guess sort of like the name that would help it to get to more audiences.
Right, exactly. Now, what's interesting too is this movie's been heavily criticized for explicit gore, but it's really not that gory.
Really not.
I mean, there's the scene. No, there's a scene where Judy and Tom get blown up in the truck, and so the zombies are having barbecue, and that's pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
And the dead body in the house is gruesome, but I don't remember. Like, I've seen far worse or far more gorier films than this one, and I think its reputation precedes it.
Yeah, and as we talked about Psycho as well, both movies, this one and also Psycho, they're both pretty tame by today's standards. They're really not. They're really not gory, even though their reputation is of being, gory in their own right.
And that's one of the things too, as I've been trying to explore, is to just sort of make sure that these movies are, when you first watch them, like say now, when you first watch one of these films, you have to watch them with the understanding of the time in which they were released. Because even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's almost hardly any blood in that movie.
Sure.
And you walk away from it thinking you saw far more than you actually did with the title alone.
Right. Well, Well, and again, that goes back to very effective filmmaking. It's more the suggestion of violence, the suggestion of sexuality in the case of Psycho, let's say, the suggestion of, all these things that we're talking about, because that's what was, sort of available for the time, and it was really up to the imagination of the filmmakers to really bring that out. And again, it's a huge advantage when you're faced with that.
Right. I'd love to know where George Romero got the concept of this version of a zombie, because it's so now ingrained in our culture.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you get the arguments between the fast zombies and the slow-moving zombies,
sure.
which to me, while fast zombie movies are fun and can be scary, I think slow-moving zombies, in my brain, make more logical sense because they're fighting against rigor mortis.
That's kind of where I stand as well. I never really understood the concept of the fast zombie. I always found the slow ones to be more true because of what you just said of whatever their bodies are fighting in that moment. That, and also it just adds more suspense.
Right. One thing that adds to the atmosphere of this film too, and I was actually shocked to find out that the music, I was looking up who composed the music for it. It was mainly stock music that they had gotten.
Is that right?
I don't think I've ever heard this music anywhere. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's like a credit. There's like a list of like maybe 10 people that are uncredited in this movie.
No kidding. Wow.
And all of their music was basically stock music.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. And and this was one of those movies where, it was very much a team effort. I mean, George Romero did the shooting and the editing himself, for example. Like he didn't have a dedicated, director of photography or a dedicated editor, did all that himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And thereby just shows you, his talent.
Yeah.
Not only in the storytelling, but in the overall making of the movie. And I think sometimes that's one of the best ways a movie is made, is when the person has the vision and they can control everything. I think even Robert Rodriguez does the same thing. He doesn't often use a cinematographer. He's behind the camera himself.
Yes.
And then he's even editing them himself.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because when I was in film school, I saw one of Robert Rodriguez's 10-minute film school things, and I remember watching it and thinking, this is very much like George Romero, because he would do the same thing, do his own shooting, do his own editing, and shoot on a shoestring budget, but still get the result that he wants.
Right. Now, one other person to mention about that was associated with this film would be Tom Savini.
Yes.
Who helped, basically did all the special effects, the zombie makeup and the gore effects. And he's another one that we could seriously do a whole show on him, just sit down and talk about Tom Savini and his work. I remember when I met him once, there's a place in Massachusetts called Spooky World.
Yep.
And he was like in the final building that you go into. They had guests there. It was him and the guy that was the lead from American Werewolf in London, whose name escapes me at the moment. But anyways, I'm with my wife, and we're walking up, and I'm going to get Tom Savini's autograph, and then all of a sudden, I felt like I was, 6 years old, standing there holding the picture in my hand, waiting for an autograph. It's like,
that's awesome.
Oh my God, it's Tom Savini.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah.
But, no, I believe he directed the remake of this movie. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Let me look actually, because
John Russo wrote also.
Right. Okay. Yep.
That was in 1990.
Yep, he did, and I actually did not see that one, but I know there have been several. Well, not remakes, but like there have been, several versions of this movie, from the remake to the re-release. And I remember I was fooled one time. I went to go buy a copy of this movie at a movie stop, which is no longer running, but found a copy of this. $10. I'm like, special features, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, oh great, I've been wanting to own a copy. I go home, I pop in Night of the Living Dead, and it's not the one I want. It has like all the additional reshoots that were done. I was so mad. I was like, no, this is not what I wanted.
Is that the one with Sid Haig?
Yes.
I haven't seen that one.
No. It's like there was like new additional footage added to the 1968 film, and you could tell where the cuts were. And it was just like, I was like, no, what is this?
Oh, that's bad. Is that the one where they got the guy that played the first ghoul to come back and reprise the role?
Yes. Okay. Yep. Okay, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's just, why did they? And there's a colorized version too, I think.
Which is not even needed. It's just
right. It just defeats the whole purpose of the film.
Yeah.
Which, this is yet another movie where, Romero is able to use the shadows to his advantage in this film, and black and white just is so good in so many instances.
It's so appropriate. Yeah, it's great.
The remake is not bad. I am not a fan of remakes. There are a handful that I think are pretty good. Like, all right, for example, John Carpenter's The Thing, you could really say it's a reimagining of the original story, not a remake of the original movie. But the remake of this movie is, I remember I saw it in the theater and I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it. I think it was it 1990? And I think, I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'd have to watch it again. But I do remember watching it quite a few times after that. And because what they do is, it's essentially the same story, but they've got better actors in it. Tony Todd plays the Ben part, and they expand some of the characters' roles, including Barbara. Her character kind of makes a transformation in the film and actually becomes a strong female lead in the
wow.
movie, which is, yeah, it's for that alone, it's worth it. It's my God, I'm doing terrible today remembering names, but she was the telepath chick on Babylon 5.
Really?
She was part of the telepath group. I can't think of her name. It'll come to me probably by the end of the show. But anyways, yeah. So the remake is worth looking at, but I think you really should see the original first because.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I haven't seen I haven't seen the remake, but the original I do watch every once in a while along with Dawn of the Dead, which I think is just as good, if not a little better than the original.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawn of the Dead is a whole different animal, but it just works. I just love that movie.
Oh yeah, it's a near perfect movie, without a doubt.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, what are your final thoughts on this film, and would you consider it one of the scariest films of all time?
Yeah, I would actually. There's something every time I watch it. There's something fresh about it, even though I've seen it, a handful of times, I always go into it with always seeing something new. I think this time around, the social commentary stuff really popped into my head this time around, given what's going on in the world right now. But I think even just in general as a movie, it still stands on its own.
Absolutely. And would you I still find it scary myself.
Yes.
Especially if I put it on at night and I'm alone and watching it. It's really terrifying. You would mention that you don't really get scared at movies. At one point, and I do. I don't emote, I don't cry at movies, but I get scared.
Do you? Yeah.
Even if I know the jump scare is coming, I jump.
Yeah. Well,
My son always makes fun of me for it.
Yeah. No, I think it really depends for me on what in what context. I mean, I find jump scares work for me if I'm sitting in the movie theater with the sound blaring and the big picture on the screen. I think that's different. On your television, it's not the same.
Yeah. So, would you recommend this to a younger audience, especially considering the fact that we've been inundated with zombie movies and TV shows and all that stuff?
I definitely would recommend this because I think, again, going back to the source of where this genre really got started, and really came into popularity, this is this is a must-see because of the way it's done. Unlike most of the zombie movies today, this is done in a way that's, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just really well done, and it's in the way it was made, and that's again because of the limitations from budgetary constrictions to the time period, whatever. It's one to see for those reasons.
Right, absolutely, and it's effective. It's very effective.
It is very
in what
effective.
It's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So, Chris, where can our audience find you online?
So my website is storiesmotion.com, and there you can find all my films that I'm working on and other various projects. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram under Stories in Motion. And, that's about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We'll be talking to you again soon.
Yeah, take care.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this special edition episode of Then Is Now called 13 Days of Hallowtober. If you want to chime in on today's show, please send us an email at thenisnow42@gmail.com. And you can also check out our website, havenpodcasts.com. And we have another show called The East Meets the West, where we discuss spaghetti westerns and Shaw Brothers movies. So we hope you check that show out as well. As always, please leave us a review on iTunes so that more people can find us and spread the word about Then Is Now. Join us again next episode.
Then Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.